movement and its role um, in the PNS, the peripheral nervous system. All right, so muscles are controlled primarily by nerves. The muscular and nervous system are linked together. Skeletal muscles, which we've already mentioned before when we were talking about the different tissues in chapter 4, skeletal muscles are voluntary. And so they contract only when stimulated by somatic motor neurons. You have to consciously think for your muscles to be able, your skeletal muscles to be able to contract, to generate a force. Upper motor neurons are the neurons of the primary motor cortex, which make that decision to actually do a movement. But then they send a signal to our lower motor neurons, which actually are in contact with these skeletal muscle fibers, release acetylcholine, and initiate the contraction. So you consciously think of the movement that you're going to make here in your upper motor neurons, and then that is sent to your lower motor neurons, the nerves in your arms, legs, and different parts of your body, and that's how you actually make the movement. Right? So your lower motor neurons are multipolar neurons. So cell bodies are either in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, which we've recently discussed, or the brainstem. The axons, remember, axons carry the action potential, are in the peripheral nervous system. You have motor neuron pools, groups of lower motor neurons that innervate the same muscles. So there's this redundancy that we see, multiple neurons innervating the same muscles, and they can be clustered in the anterior horn of the spinal cord. And so we have large motor neurons, which is the majority of neurons within these pools, stimulate skeletal muscle fibers to contract by excitation contraction mechanism. And then you have smaller motor neurons also found in these neuron pools innervate intrafusal fibers, part of a specialized stretch receptor. Right? So what is the big picture of movement? We see here we have the upper motor neurons in the premotor cortex, right? Cortex surface. We have a motor program that is at play. So those upper motor neurons. Then we have the basal nuclei enable the thalamus to stimulate upper motor neurons of the primary motor cortex, right? And this signal is being sent. It's going to be sent down to our lower motor neurons. Step 3, the upper motor neurons stimulate lower motor neurons. And step 4, the lower motor neurons stimulate a skeletal muscle to contract. And that's how movement happens. And at the same time, a sensory neuron is sensing that movement. And that's what's going on as well. So when my brain, upper motor neurons, through my basal nuclei are allowing this to happen. I'm sending this program how I'm going to pick up my glass, sending a signal to my lower motor neurons that are sending signals to the muscles in my arm, allow me to pick up the glass. But at the same time, when I'm picking up the glass, I'm sensing this glass in my hand. I'm sensing the movement of my arm. And that is sending sensory information at the same time back to my brain. So not only is it sending in the signal to pick up the glass, but it's also sensing what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Amazing. Body's amazing. All right, so that's the big picture of muscle control. Then we have what we call reflex arcs. Reflex arcs. Sensory and sensory and motor functions sort of working together. Reflexes get a little tricky, but stay with me. So we have mechanoreceptors in muscles and tendons, monitor muscle length and force of contraction, communicate information to the spinal cord, cerebellum, and the cerebral cortex, right? So my body is sensing. So if let me just give you a quick example. Let me get so y'all can see me. My arm is straight out. I'm holding this glass. You see me, right? I'm holding this glass. Now, even with my eyes closed, if you were, there's no more in here, but if you were to pour more in here with my eyes closed, my body would not, and I'm trying to my arm is in this position. Even if you added more weight, I might move a little bit, but it would generate more force in the deltoid, which is innervated by my brachial plexus, and stay roughly in this position without me having to physically calculate how much more force do I need to keep my arm up. It would naturally reflex or react or reflex and stay in that position. So let's talk about that. So my body is sending signals to my brain, and my brain is calculating all this, the exact force needed to be able to keep my arm up. All right, so muscle spindles, tapered structures found scattered among regular contractile muscle fibers. Between 2 and 12 specialized muscle fibers are within each muscle spindle. These intrafusal fibers have contractile filaments with actin and myosin, innervated by motor neurons. And these contractile filaments are absent in central area of intrafusal fibers, right? You're going to say, what does all that mean? All right, so two structural and functional classes of sensory neurons innervate the intrafusal fibers. We have these primary afferents, so respond to stretch when first initiated. They respond to stretch. If my arm is in this position, I push it this way, it's stretching the muscle. The muscle is being stretched out. Contract, stretch, contract, stretch. Push it that way, it's stretching the muscle. Respond to stretch. So these primary afferents, remember afferent, sensing, they respond to stretch when first initiated. And you have these secondary afferents respond to both static length of the muscle and position. So know where the muscle is in the position that I'm in. We also have these Golgi tendon organs, mechanoreceptors located within the tendons. Tendon, remember, we haven't done the muscle chapter yet, but tendons connect muscle to bone, tendon. So we have these Golgi tendon organs monitor tension generated by the muscle contraction. Your body knows exactly how much tension is being generated by the muscle contraction. Right. So, and these Golgi tendon organs consist of encapsulated bundle of collagen fibers, 20 extrafusal muscle fibers, contain single somatic sensory axon that fires more rapidly as greater tension is generated. So when that muscle is tensing up, it's firing and sending that information to your CNS, your central nervous system, right? So those Golgi tendon organs, right? So this is showing you the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs. The big picture is they can sense the force of the muscle. They can sense where your muscle is, like if it's stretched out, if it's contracted. It can, so it is sending all of this sensory information to the central nervous system, right? Between the muscle spindles, between the Golgi tendon organs, we have data being sent to the brain, right? So then why is that useful? Why the spindles and the Golgi tendon organs? Why is that useful? Because of reflexes. And that's really what we want to get to. Programmed automatic responses to stimuli occur in a reflex arc, usually protective negative feedback loops. But to have a reflex, you have to have sensation. To have sensation, you have to have these muscle spindles and these Golgi tendon organs sending information back to the central nervous system. All right, so your reflexes begin with sensory stimulus and finish with a rapid motor response. The neural integration between the sensory and the motor occur in the CNS. All right, so we have what we call reflex arc. Body, my arm is straight out with the glass in it. If you were to put your hand on it, it would send information to my central nervous system, which would send, it would sense that the weight was added, send it to my central nervous system, send a signal right back to respond with more tension in this muscle to be able to hold my arm up and not let it drop. Right? Reflex arc. Reflex arc. Say it with me. Reflex arc. Reflex. Okay. Right. So the PNS detects and delivers stimulus to the CNS. CNS integrates the stimulus, so figures out what's happening, and then sends a response, a motor response back to the PNS. And there's different types of reflexes based on a number of synapses, right? So, and also the type of organ. Right, so we have the monosynaptic reflex. So it involves one single synapse within the spinal cord. So you have a sensory synapse with the motor right back, right? That's a monosynaptic. And then you have more complicated polysynaptic, where it may, instead of going just to the spinal cord and back, it goes from the spinal cord to the brain, back to the spinal cord, back to whatever area. Polysynaptic reflex. The one that I described to you was a simple stretch reflex. There's also the patellar knee-jerk reflex, which is also a simple stretch reflex, sitting on the edge of the table, tapping the knee. The tapping of the knee pulls on your, or stretches stretches the quadricep muscle, sends a signal to your spinal cord. The quadricep muscle contracts, and when you tap, kicks the leg, right? As it contracts that muscle. Spinal shows us that the reason why we do that, it shows that shows the doctor that your spinal cord is functioning properly. The patellar or knee jerk reflex. Right. This is showing you, this is the one that I demonstrated to you, right? Holding a glass, you add fluid, the reflex happens, you increase the force, and so the glass doesn't drop. Simple stretch reflex. You also have Golgi tendon reflex, which are polysynaptic. Some of them can cause muscle relaxation so that the muscle doesn't get damaged. You've seen people who are bench pressing, for instance. They're pushing, the weight is too much, and they drop. The muscles relax. Golgi tendon reflex, right? Golgi tendon reflex. The body ending up relaxing the muscle in order to protect the muscle because it can no longer strain anymore or lift anymore, right? Types of reflexes. You step on something. This is a good example of a nociception, right? Pain. If I am walking and I step on a sharp object, I quickly pick one foot up so that muscle is sort of relaxed in a sense. Like I take my weight off of that one leg, but I put all of my weight onto my other leg without even thinking about it. So my body is picking one foot up, so taking pressure off one leg, and at the same time, putting pressure on the other leg, simply because of the pain. And so our bodies, in response and reflex to the pain, and the reflex arc to the pain naturally changes the distribution of weight in my body. Similar things happen when you have a fire. You have a fire and you not a fire. You put your hand near a fire, something hot. You know, you might be reaching for something. All of your weight is going towards something that you're reaching towards. You touch it and realize it's hot, and you back up, and all of your weight shifts backwards. Right. There's also cranial nerve reflexes. I mentioned earlier the gag reflex. All right, and this is when the back of the throat, the nerve endings of the glossopharyngeal nerve and the posterior throat are stimulated, and if you stick your tongue, try to stick your finger into the back of your mouth, you'll naturally gag reflex. So you're stimulating the glossopharyngeal nerve. The blink reflex. If, you know, something gets into your eye, a piece of dust gets into your eye, triggers the somatic sensory receptors of the trigeminal nerve, and you naturally blink. Corneal blink reflex. So the gag reflex is protecting you from swallowing something that you don't want to swallow. Corneal blink reflex is protecting your eye from something getting into your eye. Lou Gehrig's disease involves the degeneration of cell bodies of motor neurons. The cell bodies, remember the soma cell bodies, motor neurons in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, as well as the upper motor neurons in the cerebral cortex. As these cell bodies degenerate, which it's not always known why it happens, but you have since these motor neuron cell bodies are degenerating, muscles start to weaken because they're not able to be stimulated. And so these muscles start to weaken, and you can eventually die from this, because your muscles aren't just become weaker and weaker over time.